Welcome to the Cyber Executive, the podcast where we mix technology, risk, and leadership like a cocktail you didn't know you needed, but now you can't live without. I am your host, Marc Ashworth, and today, our first episode of 2026. I'm excited about our guests and our topic here today because we're just hitting it straightforward, talking about AI. And she is the CEO of Pluto Security. Welcome to Shahar Bahat.
Hi, Mark. Welcome. I'm happy to be here.
I'm so glad that you could be here. But before we get rolling, do me a quick favor, everyone. Tap that follow button on your favorite podcast app and share the Cyber Executive with your friends, coworkers, and that one person in IT who shouts loudly every time someone clicks a suspicious link. Come on, let's spread the cyber love. So, Shard, thank you for being here. And, it's really a interesting topic around AI generated code. And also some, I think it's got the new nickname of vibe coding, but really it's AI code and how we do it. With that, what sort of risk or primary security risk have you been seeing with it since the introduction of vibe coding compared to traditional software development practices? I mean, it's such a different model now.
Yes, absolutely. So, first of all, I will start by who can do that, right? Until now, people that developed were mainly traditional developers, but AI coding or vibe coding actually let anyone in the company to be a developer. So it's like spreading or democratizing the word, right? Anybody can create anything. Another thing about that we're seeing is that nobody really looks fully at the code. Nobody know what it's doing. If somebody's changing something, the whole code, the whole supply chain and infrastructure can be changed, and there's no way to track it. And the third thing we're seeing is the processes are changing. We were used to have like code entering CI/CD, entering cloud, but now that there's so many tools and so many people that using it, and people can create things for like production, for their own, for like prototypes, a lot of code are not going into CI/CD. It's running and have a life on its own on the endpoints of the employees.
Yeah, and I'm definitely seeing examples out there where companies are not validating the code. There was one that was just recently pushed out there that it was a MFA validation. It had to be done through AI code because it says we will be sending you the code 1, 2, 3, 4 to your cell phone. Please enter your code. And it's like, okay. Well, it's nice that they're speeding things up, I guess, but with the MFA, but it's not really doing what it needs to do. So someone's not checking something off of there, that's for sure. So, with vibe coding, you know, organizations' threat models, particularly around supply chain and dependency risk, is going to be changing with that. Based off what we just said. So, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So my thoughts is that there are some old like models or metrics that can complement it for that, but because so many processes change and so many people that creating it changed, we have to adjust like the models and the framework. We have to understand the context of who is doing what for what use case, what tools and are being used to what situations. And like there are innovators, there are like production, there are internal tooling. So the models should be there, but they should be around enablement. This is a good change. We want people to use AI. We want marketing to use it. We want developers to use it. We want IT to use it. We want product to use it. How we can create models that will keep it controlled and guardrails, but enable everybody to create and to do that and enable this to evolve. And I think that's a big challenge. A lot of conversation I've been lately in are around what are the right frameworks and what are the right guardrails that can be implemented for that.
Great. So, one thing about it, as you mentioned, is the speed to delivery. We know it's so much faster. Instead of spending hours on it, you tell it what it wants and it spits it out in 30 seconds or more. But, that speed advantage of vibe coding begins to outweigh at some point the increased risk or technical debt risk. So, how should leaders balance their teams accessing this and using this type of code versus old school?
So, sentence I heard lately a lot is from a lot of management saying the risk of not using AI is higher than the risks of using AI uncontrolled. So, the reality is this is happening. Like, it's not something we can stop. It's not something we can block. And I think the guide point is when I feel there's like I'm out of control, or when I feel I don't have enough control on these systems, I need to change my processes. I need to adjust my tools in order to have the visibility and the enforcement and control capabilities on this area. And it's a very wide area, right? We have vibe coding tools as IDEs. We have SaaS builders out there like Lovable, Replic. We have like workflows like N8N, and we need to make sure we don't let like the Wild West happen, but we create a workflow to enable it.
And with that, there a risk, or what do you think the risk is around abilities of the people that's doing the development? Because now, if we're relying so much on AI to be able to troubleshoot that, you have to understand and know the code. And it gets back to what you had mentioned earlier: people's not looking at the code now. So, if we're not looking at the code, how are we understanding the code? And if we can't understand the code, we can't debug. So it's that pyramid. In that adding more risk?
It's adding a lot of risk. First of all, for people who knows to develop, but just stop looking at the code, because you can review it to some point. Like you cannot really understand everything that, or review everything that's out there. And also, while creating the code, you don't know what's happening, what files the tools are accessing in order to create the code, what things behind the scenes they're enabling. So both the creation of the code and then the code that is not reviewed, entering new risks. As you said, with authentication method and MFA, like logical risk, but also like supply chain risks. As you said, what has been used inside the code. And as we discussed earlier, every change is not changing one line of code. It's changing everything. So even if you review it one time, you change like one button and the whole code is rewritten. So that's a whole new risk. Also, what I say is, as I said earlier, we're not focusing only on people that understand coding. You have a lot of like people that never code before that now have the capabilities. Those are not people that not only understand security. A lot of the time, they don't understand technology. And so when they say, hey, use this stuff and please put it here, they do not understand that behind the scene, there's a secret. Somebody's using their oath token to connect between things. They don't understand that click, click, click enables a whole new third party infrastructure that's the company did not prove. And we see it in a lot of use cases. The amount of databases with sensitive data of companies we have seen, and the amount of hard coded secrets or tokens or weird integrations that people have created has been insane.
Yeah, and the likelihood of introducing common vulnerability, I think that is still there because, Microsoft, I think, has said that, 30 to 35% of their code's now being done with AI. Well, we know they're still introducing just as much, where many fixes coming out with that. So you would think that that would be reduced now off of theirs. Uh, you know, the with that rapid assembly of the code, and it's if it pulls in junk from somewhere else to create that, then you're gonna get vulnerable code coming back. So introducing those insecure defaults and injection flaws and improper authorization, like you mentioned, uh, how much more are we putting ourselves to that versus, having more static code that we're pulling from through known libraries?
Yeah, I think there were a couple of researchers around this. Like the AI don't have like top of mind security aspect. So the code is not written in security in mind. So a lot of the things you said, whether those are logical vulnerabilities or actual CVEs, are being used because it's not something that has been thinking on it. Even if it's been thinking on, a lot of the time it doesn't have the context of security. So in this manner, yes, there's a lot. It's two things. First of all, there's a lot more capabilities to mistakes and entering vulnerabilities and security issues to the code or to the artifacts. But second of all, we have much more of those out there. So it's both the ability to enter them and the scale they're entering in that we need to approach.
So what is the likelihood, do you think, of vibe coding along long-term maintainability, organization ability to patch, remediation vulnerabilities, quickly? You mentioned that it recreates the code each time if you make the change. So if it's doing that, is it really fixing anything? And how do you know it's not um rolling back to previous vulnerabilities that might have been fixed?
Yeah, so today for a lot of the use cases, you don't really know and you do not really control that. And you don't really have the right process for security as all those tools are new, right, in the last 1 or 2 years, and also like entering new workflows to the company. I think another issue is there are so many tools, like you don't have one solution for the company. You have different tools for different use cases that act differently. I do think the tools are getting more and more better, like in the security basic, but there's so much more around there that needs to be protected. And I think the secret here is not to do things afterwards. Only like you need to have things created secure by default with the guardrails, with the enforcement of what's being created. You always need to monitor afterwards, but if you will do it only after the code is generated, you will always be in the speed of you will not win the speed of creation. So you have to do it ahead of time. And I think that AI made the shift to be even earlier than we had until now in the creation.
Right. So I've asked this in other conversations around very similar topics around accountability. So who is ultimately accountable for these flaws when it's AI assisted coding? Is it the developer, the security team? Ultimately, it's the organization, but where does that reliability fall, or the accountability fall?
That's the $1 million question. I think about that. I think that's amazing question, and we can discuss it hours for hours. I think another thing you didn't ask, but it's also in the question is it the tools responsibility, right? Do we expect them to do that? And I think you didn't ask it because you're starting to understand they will not do that. They are product, they're not security products. So they will do it at some point, but they don't will not have it fully. So everything we create using those tools is our accountability. Similar maybe to how we see cloud, right? I created VM in Azure. I'm accountable for security of the things on the VM. So same here. I create something with those AI tools. I'm accountable for it. And when I'm saying I go deep dive to your question. I think, in my take, beside the organization, it's at the end the security team who does the triage, who understand the risk of the organization. But the communication now is different because if in the past the communication was between security and developers, now it's between the security and the organization. And also the remediation or the guardrails enforcement are also kind of shared responsibility. If there's an issue with an artifact somebody created or with the code somebody created, he will need to fix it. So there's like another layer on the step. But at the end of the day, I think that security will be accountable for the security of the organization, including the things on those things.
And and I'll push back a little bit on you there because it's the developer actually that's creating that is dealing with the code and creating the code, and he is saying, "I created this code," whether he's used a tool to do that or not. And so the development team, I think, is where the responsibility is. It's the security team to provide the governance and oversight to make sure bad stuff maybe doesn't go out, but the developer is one that's creating the code. It's much like the construction worker is the guy that's building the house, but it's the inspector that's supposed to be making sure it's safe, right? So the ultimate responsibility goes back to the construction worker because they built something that's not safe. So wouldn't that same logic fall there, don't you think?
I agree. Like I agree that the person that created the code or that gave the instruction to create the code in our use case
Mm.
would be responsible. Uh I want to say that as it's democratized and as people are less and less understanding what they're creating at some points, uh, there will be limited, like, it's true that they're accountable and it's true that they created the code, but the security team would have much more work, I think, in explaining it or in communicating it or in understanding like how to uh, understand the risk and how to work with those end parts to solve them. So yes. who created the code or get the instruction is the person that's responsible to fix it and is the person that entered the risk. But the person, as you said, that are responsible to understand and to oversee and to make sure it's being addressed by somebody and being known is the security.
Mhm. Yeah, and there's a fine line there too, because then it becomes, okay, well, security team should be, uh the way the logic is working off of this is it doesn't follow the way it is. So why didn't security fix it? Check that. Well, that's not a security vulnerability. That's an operational thing. And so now, there's that fine line. Okay, well, yeah, that we didn't find any vulnerabilities in the code, but just that doesn't mean that it was working properly either. So that and so there's that discussion there too that has to be very careful off of that to know where the ownership and the accountability there really falls between the business and the developer to make sure that the logic's right. So,
Exactly.
uh, or go ahead, go ahead.
And I think that's a very interesting question as we're debating along the way about like who how to handle this and who is the accountable and who's the owner of each issue. And I think like all the models and all things we created would need to expand to adjust, but it have like the same uh reasoning behind them as we had, but in a broader way of people and broader way of uh creation flows.
And one thing that would help with that is the organization's secure coding standards and architectural guide rails around the coding practices and how the applications are being done. So how should those evolve to support vibe coding without, you know, stifling innovation for that matter, because you want to still move fast, the speed of the business, but yet we need to make sure that we're doing it correctly.
Yeah, so I think in this aspect, as I said before, we need to make sure that as much as things that the framework of security the organization want to work with are being enforced by default. Like as much as tools are open with the relevant guardrails and of course around what can be done and how it can be done. And I think it should be adjusted per the use case and the context. You cannot have like one stiff framework for everybody. It should be contextual about like who is using what tool and what they're trying to do. And with that, the guardrails should adjust. And luckily, we are in the era of AI when we can actually adjust and use this context to do it. But this is the only way I think where the security team will feel that their controls and governance are being held and will have the comfortability of enabling things. And for people that creating, whether they're developers or business users, will have the ability to do stuff and not just being blocked. And I think that's a very important flow. And I think will become in very different areas, right? With what configuration can be used, what are the artifacts can or cannot do or can be used, what data can pass. So it's on across different areas in the creation process.
Right. So, being security, governance is very important off of this and not just the vulnerability testing and everything. So, what governance controls are essential to prevent vibe coding from bypassing those security reviews and threat modeling? And more importantly, change management for that matter, because, we talked about how the code might reintroduce things because it's recreating the code each time. So, how's that going to affect change management? That gets very complex. So, what's your thoughts on that?
I think we should make sure for specific things to be out there. First of all, access management, right? Who can use what they can do with it. But second of all is what are the infrastructure can or cannot be used. There should be some guardrails both on that. Like the tool cannot just use anything. And the third of all, which I think is most important, is the deployment aspect. This changed a lot the way we deploy or the way things can go just out and be live. And I think today most of our security is focused in the deployment phase as a gating area, as a securing area. And now we need to find the new deployment points and to make sure they are controlled, they are just, and they have the security gating there. So I think those are 3 points that are very, very interesting. Lastly, I think you need to understand the connections. I think you have very unique new attack paths now that you have not expected and are evolving based on those new type of creation and new types of tools and infrastructure entering our life based on that. So I think we need to adjust about how attack would look like in this era.
And, as you were talking, I was still thinking around the change management side and looking at, code changes, and so does does the versioning off of that I would almost think you would have to do a version comparison to make sure between the last version to the current version of what's changed, and then, your change controls to document, okay, well, this was supposed to be changed, but then this here, and roll it back. So that could reduce, if it's done properly, I would think, uh, the it could hamper some of the benefits of using vibe coding because now you're spending more time with that validation and the integrity checks to make sure something else didn't change to make this happen. So do you think that's going to, when done properly, do you think that that's going to hamper some of this speed to delivery?
I hope that those tools, first of all, will get better about what is being changed on one hand. And second of all, I think we would utilize AI to manage those change managements at one point. But yeah, I think currently, today, we already see that the workflows or the, let's say, operational stuff are taking back the innovation as well. It's like it's not only security risk, but also operational challenges. I think that have the friction with the AI and the innovation. And yes, as long as it will not get better, I think it will take us back at some point as it is today. I think as we progress, those two will get better because I think that's one of the main big issues they're having today. Not only security wise, also logical wise. Like you change one things and seven other things are changing. So it's hard to to trust. I think some of what they're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. So data exposure is always an issue as well. Whether it's the keys of or some sort of logins or something along that line, or actual data that's happening. That exposure risk when developers are using AI tools could be increased because of sensitive code or data, especially for a company that that's what they do is they're developing a product. So how do you think that data exposure risk is increasing, and what can we do about that?
I think that you can see it in a couple of ways. First of all, as what data is being used in order to create a code, right? You do not know what files or what things are being used in order to create a code, and this can be used with sensitive data or can you use with data you don't want to be used. So this is one thing. The other thing is, as we said, the AI coding can do a lot of integration that you haven't expected of or you didn't want it. So data can be open or transferred to other places when you didn't expect it. Whether the tool is using browser or the tool is integrating to creating integration to other programs. I think the other thing that we're not thinking about is not only data exposure, but also data deprecation. Sometimes you are using data and you can make something bad and the data can be deprecated. We heard a lot of use cases from teams that somebody created something because he wanted to make the process better and deprecated a lot of data that now is ruined, and not because like a ransomware or something, but because somebody just thought to do something big. So I think, lastly, using AI tools, you're entering a lot of supply chain risks that now also have access to your environment, to your data. So this is another risk we need to take into consideration in general. Various aspects. Some of them are old issues that now are getting bigger. Some of them are new issues. For example, one of companies I talked to in the world of like more of gaming is now scaring about IP, for example, because IP is now a thing. It's not only like in very different industries. If I use something to work on my data and I have an IP in the code that now being learned, it's also some of the data that's being shared around the world. So this is another interesting aspect.
Yeah, very true. I didn't think about that on those systems that are sharing that component of it. especially if it's a tool that's AI specific for creating code, on that, is that staying within your organization? And is it, how's the training and learning? I would think you would still have to go through that same due diligence off of that, that you would with, using ChatGPT or Copilot or something along that line. So make sure everything's containerized. So, kind of along that line, what are some good suggestions around preventing accidental leakage of secrets, credentials, and that proprietary logic when using rapid AI assisted development?
First of all, know what tools you have in your environment, right? What people are using, and what are the like guardrails based on configuration and what the tools can or cannot do. Second of all, make sure you check both the creation process and the artifacts whenever they are, even if they have iterations, as we discussed before. Third of all, yes, like there are management control. Like a lot of companies have like a very management of secrets and authentication for like their critical systems, but there are some systems that are not managed internal centrally, but in different places, like HubSpot sometimes, or like Workday or System, or like SharePoint, that somebody else is managing them, and then those are the main places where authentication and data are leaking because it's something that we overlooked and those tools are actively using it, or those people are using it.
So, um, how can organizations detect that vibe coding apps are being used and prevent that drift from outside approved security architectures and control baselines from occurring?
That's a great question. So I think that's a very not an easy task because there's so many, as we said, there's software, there's SaaS, there's like things, and employees would be like create very creative about how they can use because they want to advance the world. So if you have managed browsers that don't approve something, they would use an unmanaged browser. So there's a lot of tricks and stuff. I think there's a combination of a lot of data points to understand first of all what is being used, but also how is being used, in what license, if it's free, if it's not free. It's also have like issues, right? Free licenses usually automatically learn on your data. So that's another aspect you want to consider. Is it from corporate email or personal email? Like there's a lot of aspect there that needs to be asked about how things should be uh, accessed and managed. And I think it's a combination for very different data sources. And again, for what I said, the context matter. If I use something with my personal email for my work computer, but I'm creating something for my kid, nobody cares. But if I create something for the enterprise and I use data or I use some integration or like, so it matters what did I do with it. And it matters to security as well because there's so many noise and you want to focus on the right thing to address.
Right. So, as the CEO, I know that one of the things is, you need to get the product out, you need to, speed of delivery and those sort of things. But how do you still foster a security first mindset in the culture, and but still prioritize that speed and experimentation and creativity that you want in an organization?
That's a great question. So first of all, as a security company, I would say most of our employees have some much more awareness, I would say, than other companies. Uh, but in general, I think if we go back to accountability, we tell everybody that they should use AI and they should provide tools that help them. But they also are, as we said, accountable for what they're doing. So as a small company, we do not have a centralized place of security. Everybody is like doing security in this aspect. We do have somebody that monitor it, but it's easier to give that accountability to everyone that creates and understanding that the team is speeding the work, but if they will not take this into account, the speed does not like it will matter to till one point, I think. The other thing is we are actively aware for that and we're looking into that and we're reviewing the risks we're entering as much as we're reviewing the um, speed we're working. So as we try to check ourselves. How much did we use AI? How much can we more improve our work? We're also checking ourselves. How much did we secure it? How much issues do we have? How much we can make the gap smaller because we're very aware about the risks that it's being providing for us.
Right. Well, one of the things that I do with all my guests is I ask the same questions at the end just to get their take off of that. And some people really enjoys it. Some of them's like, oh my God. But one of the things that, or one of the questions is, what is something in the security industry that we could do better?
Whew. That's a great question. I think that we need to change our mindset. I think we're halfway there, but I think the mindset of like enablement and like saying yes and what we can do to enable as much as possible is a shift we're doing in the last years. I think we're not moving fast enough as technology is moving. So I think we need to improve. And it's not easy, right? Because we are used to do something, our old tools are used to do something, but we need to do this shift of mindset. And I think it's also coming up about trying to uh think about, as I said, guardrails by default to help people use as much as possible and not like blocking or not like removing stuff for being used if we see a mistake. Like the question should be if we see something going wrong, okay, how would I be able this to be contained and go right and know how would be able it to not happen again? And I think that's a very different question should improve.
Yeah, and changing the culture not only organizationally but industry wide to be that security mindset it is challenging, and it runs at the speed of mud, right? So which usually doesn't move very fast unless it's in California down a hill. But so but yeah, it's definitely a challenge. I do think so. Another one is, what is something that you're tired of hearing about?
Hmm, that's a great question. Um, I think in that the same way, I'm tired of hearing like maybe no, everything is under control. I think that as we move fast, never everything is under control. I think that it's okay. That's reality, and I think we need to prioritize what we care about and what we not, and that's okay. But I think to say everything is under control is not to understand the speed of things that are moving. And I think regarding also the mindset, I think that as much as we will accept that things are moving by day, by hour. Like every time I open LinkedIn, I'm like surprised about things that happen. So uh, we need to understand that while we cannot control everything, how we can prioritize the thing we care about. And I think that's something I hear a lot and would like to hear less.
Great. And finally, what are the latest trends in security that you're actively monitoring right now?
First of all, the tools that have been created, like the vibe coding tool across the thing, I think that's insane. I think that every week we have a new tool for a different industry or a different capability or a different like new thing that's created. And I think it has impact on everything because it has impact on the whole of the businesses. Like every time it affects a different sector or a different job that can be done better. So I'm very excited about those area and I constantly get updated. Second of all, I think I'm very interested to see like the change about what would be the main place where people will be around. Would it be like still the browser? Would it be like the IDE? Would it be a different place like ChatGPT? Like what's the main place people will spend the time around? I think that's a very interesting change that I'm monitoring as well.
Yeah, one that I'm watching is the advertisement in the chatbots. There's talks around that, 'cause it's a money loser, the AI is, and they gotta increase their revenue. I think they said, what was it, 20 billion in revenue for OpenAI, but it cost them 74 billion in expenses to run. So, which is mostly on the training. So I would think that at some point that would get better and that would lower things, but still, that's a model of how long that they can really keep getting money from investment off of there that I think would be very interesting to see. So, well, Thank you, Shar, so much for being on here, and thank you everyone for hanging out today on today's episode of the Cyber Executive. If you like what you heard, hit the follow button on your favorite podcast and share it with your friends. And don't be shy, share it with your friends. We really want that. The more, the merrier. So thank you, and until next time, Shar, thank you again.
Thank you so, so much for having me.